There's something about caves that stirs both awe and dread. Maybe it's the darkness or the silence. Maybe it's the feeling that once you're inside, you're not in control anymore. Nature is. On a quiet November night in 2009, a young man named John Edward Jones crawled deep into one of America's most dangerous cave systems, Nutty Putty Cave in Utah. He went in expecting a short adventure. Instead, he'd spend over 28 hours trapped in an unescapable position, 200 feet underground. Rescue teams fought against time, gravity, and the earth itself. But in the end, they couldn't bring him out. This is the chilling true story of the man who entered the deepest cave in America and never came back. The Nutty Putty Caves, discovered in 1960, were named after the soft brown clay coating many of their narrow, twisting passages. This cave system, located in Utah, consisted of multiple rooms connected by low, cramped tunnels that demanded crawling and wriggling to navigate. Despite its tight spaces, the cave was considered beginner-friendly and attracted thousands of amateur spelunkers each year. Popular features included the Big Slide, where the floor dropped at a sharp 45-degree angle, and the Maze, a confusing network of tight chambers and corridors. One unique chamber even featured a hollow rock that would ring like a bell when tapped. However, beneath the surface fun lay real risks. Between 1999 and 2004, several people, including 2 Boy Scouts, became trapped in the cave and required professional rescues. These incidents prompted safety changes. The cave was gated for a time, then reopened with a strict registration system to manage crowds and ensure accountability. That was the situation on November 24, 2009, when 26-year-old John Edward Jones and his family, including his brother Josh, entered Nutty Putty Cave. Though both brothers were experienced cavers, this was their first and last visit to that infamous underground maze. For nearly an hour, everything was going smoothly. John Edward Jones and his group, which included his brother Josh, crawled, slid, and squeezed their way through the twisting labyrinth of Nutty Putty Cave. Laughter echoed through the narrow corridors as they marveled at each new chamber. They were experienced cavers, comfortable in the dark, and familiar with the thrill of tight spaces. Around 9 p.m., John spotted what he believed was the entrance to a section of the cave known as the Birth Canal. A notoriously narrow stretch, aptly named for how tightly it pinched around those brave enough to navigate it. The entrance certainly matched the description, a tight crevice just wide enough to worm through. Confident in his skills and sure of his bearings, John slid in headfirst. The tunnel sloped downward. For a brief moment, John hesitated. The narrow shaft dipped into darkness, and the tightness of the passage pressed in from all sides. But he reassured himself. The birth canal was supposed to be uncomfortable. It would open up soon, he thought. He just had to keep going. But he wasn't in the birth canal. Unknowingly, John had entered an uncharted, unrecognized passage. A tunnel so small it had never been mapped or explored. It was never meant for human entry. And then, he stopped. The passage tightened around him. He tried to move forward, but couldn't. He tried to wriggle backward, but gravity pulled him deeper. His arms were pinned at his sides. The walls pressed in on his chest. He realized too late that he was trapped. Wedged upside down in a nearly vertical shaft, the diameter no larger than a washing machine. Panic hadn't fully set in yet, but the reality was already terrifying. Josh, just behind him, quickly realized something was wrong. He called out, and John responded, strained and breathless. Josh tried to pull his brother out by the legs, but only managed to move him a few inches. It wasn't enough. Realizing they needed help, fast, Josh crawled out of the cave, leaving another friend to stay with John. He emerged into the cold night and called emergency services. Within hours, rescue teams were on the scene. But the location of the trap presented a near-impossible challenge. The shaft where John was stuck was so narrow that only one rescuer could reach him at a time. Progress was painfully slow. They tried to widen the rock with drills, but even after hours of effort, they only gained a few inches of space. Eventually, they abandoned the drilling and focused on a rope and pulley system. A loop was secured around John's legs, the only part of him they could access. Slowly, inch by inch, they began to haul him up. There was hope. John was in agony, but calm. At one point, he was high enough to speak with rescuers and even received a radio to talk to his pregnant wife, who was waiting above ground. It had been 19 hours since he became trapped. 19 hours spent upside down in a space so tight that breathing itself was difficult. Blood had been pooling in his head for nearly a full day. The pressure could rupture blood vessels, blind him, or suffocate him as his organs collapsed against his lungs. For most people, even 10 minutes upside down can be fatal. John had endured 19 hours. Still, he cracked a smile. When asked how he was doing, he replied, "It sucks. I'm upside down. I can't believe I'm upside down. My legs are killing me." He was exhausted, in pain, but still hopeful. He was so close. Rescue, relief, family. It was all within reach. And then, everything went horribly wrong. As rescuers gave one final pull on the rope, disaster struck. Something gave way with a loud crack. A bolt from the cave wall snapped free, and a chunk of stone shattered. The nearest rescuer was hit in the face, knocked unconscious by the flying debris. When he came to, the passage was filled with dust and darkness. Then came the devastating realization. John had slipped back down into the narrow shaft they'd worked so hard to pull him from. The stone arch around which the rope was anchored had collapsed. The next bolt had ripped free, creating slack that allowed John to fall. The bolt that failed was the same one that struck the rescuer. With urgency, a replacement rescuer crawled in, calling John's name, but received no reply. They could only hear his labored, shallow breaths. Another rescuer attempted to reach him, but became stuck and had to be pulled out. A doctor was brought in to assess the situation. The news was heartbreaking. John Edward Jones had passed away. After nearly 28 hours trapped upside down, the strain on his body was too much. He was just 26, fit, with a baby on the way. His loss stunned everyone. Soon became clear that recovering John Edward Jones's body would be far too dangerous. The shaft where he remained was too narrow, too unstable, and any attempt could risk more lives. Devastated by the tragedy, the landowner initially considered demolishing the entire cave system with explosives to prevent future incidents, but was ultimately persuaded against it. Instead, the decision was made to seal the cave permanently. A concrete plug was poured into the entrance, closing it off forever and turning Nutty Putty Cave into John's final resting place, a tomb beneath the earth. At the entrance, a memorial plaque was placed to honor John's memory, paying tribute to a courageous young man whose life was cut tragically short doing something he loved.